Hi, welcome to History with Dan. Sometimes buildings are moved from one lot to another. In this video, I'm going to talk about two churches that were moved in the city of Hartford, Connecticut, one in 1860 and the other in 1907. We'll start with the church on the left, which was built in 1846. The Unitarian Church of the Savior was built in 1846 at the corner of Trumbull and Asylum Streets. It was a very expensive church to build, and soon the congregation was having financial troubles. So they sold the building, and in 1860 it was moved, and actually in its place, the brownstone Charter Oak Bank building was erected, which is still a landmark in that location today. So the church building was acquired by the Episcopalians, and it was moved from Trumbull and Asylum all the way to Sigourney Street, where it became Trinity Episcopal Church. The image on the right is a section of a bird's eye view of Hartford published in 1864, which depicts the church at its new location on Sigourney Street between Asylum and Farmington Avenues. Interestingly, on the left is the nearby Asylum Hill Congregational Church, and I presume it's presented here as a ghostly shape because it wasn't finished until the following year. The old Trinity Church was torn down in the 1890s, and it was replaced by the current Trinity Church, which still stands on Sigourney Street. I made a video last week about Oakholm, which was the author Harriet Beecher Stowe's first house in Hartford, where she lived from 1864 to 1870. And you can see on the view on the right, which is from the Hartford Atlas of 1880, that Oakholm, which is now lost, was located south of Capitol Avenue, with the Park River to the east on the right. To the left, you can see a series of streets. There's Woodbine, Laurel, and Willow. And these were a neighborhood called Gleenwood, which was developed in the 1870s. Gleenwood no longer exists. Today, I-84 passes through the area, and the old single-family houses have long since been replaced by parking lots, a few apartment buildings, and a non-profit urban farm. In this section from the Hartford Atlas of 1896, Capitol Avenue on the north is to the right. The neighborhood extended south to Riverside Street and the Park River on the left, with Laurel Street extending over the Park River across a bridge. The map here shows the property at 87 Laurel Street, where the Gleenwood Congregational Church was built the following year in 1897. 10 years later, the church building was relocated. Here's a photo of the building while it was on the move that was printed in the Hartford Courant November 20th, 1907. There's a higher quality version of this photograph on the internet. I'll put a link to it in the description below. The Hartford Courant reported on November 16th, 1907, quote, "Residents of Laurel Street are enjoying a new experience, that of seeing a church, body, steeple, and all, raised from its foundations and moved through the streets to a new and more desirable location. The Gleenwood Congregational Church, which was built at number 87 Laurel Street 10 years ago, began its trip Thursday to its new foundations at Park Street and Park Terrace, and it is thought that it will take about 3 weeks to get down there with it. When the work was started, it was hoped to have it across the Laurel Street Bridge this morning, but these hopes were not to be realized, for the work was impeded by trees, wires, and other obstacles which had to be removed. At 6 o'clock last night, it was abreast of Willow Street. One large maple which stood on the church property near the walk, was cut down to allow the building, which is 62 feet long and 32 feet wide, to pass to the street. Then the building had to be turned around, and this necessitated removing a younger tree, but this was simply dug up and it was replaced. With its steeple towering 40 feet in the air, every wire in range of it had to be cut, and for the time that it is en route, telephone and trolley service in the neighborhood will be more or less interfered with. Yesterday, passengers on the trolley cars had to alight at the turnout on Laurel Street and walk around the building to Willow Street to take another car to continue out to Parkville. This trouble will be experienced all along the line until the church has reached its new destination. It is probably the largest building ever moved in that part of the city and attracted a great deal of attention yesterday. It blocks the entire width of the street, and its steeple overtops the trees and houses on its flanks. The purpose of moving the church is to place it in a locality where it will be more convenient to the working men whom it seeks to attract. The Parkville section has been built up since the church was erected, and members of the parish thought that it would be worth the $2,500 which it will cost to move it in order to have it where it could do more good." Unquote. Here's the area where the church traveled, as depicted in the Hartford Atlas of 1909. So we left the church on Willow Street in the last article. On November 20th, 1907, the Current reported, quote, "The church or chapel was built in 1898, actually it was 1897, at a cost of $3,600 at number 85 Laurel Street, and from that location it has been moved down Laurel Street, over the newly repaired bridge, and past the Electric Vehicle Company's factory into Park Street, and on up to the head of Park Terrace. The contractor used the familiar rollers and jack screws, and at times some horses were also used. The building is an attractive frame structure, and although it weighs almost 100 tons, the workmen handled it with surprising ease." Unquote. At its new location, the name of the Gleenwood Congregational Church was changed to the Pilgrim Congregational Church. Now, there's an interesting article from the Hartford Current from May 10th, 1912, so 5 years after the move. And the article is very hopeful. It says, "Pilgrim Church prospers and expands." It says that the minister, Reverend Burnap, was very enthusiastic over the present conditions of the parish and entertains an optimistic view of its future. However, 9 months later, on February 6, 1913, the Current had a headline, "Pilgrim Church is up against it. Would have pastor reconsider resignation. Members score each other for lack of interest." Quote, "That the Pilgrim Congregational Church, located at the corner of Park Street and Park Terrace, is in dire extremity, and not only in finances but in interest, enthusiasm, and Christian effort, is at a lower ebb than ever before in its career, was made clear by the statements of various members of the church at the meeting called last night to consider the resignation of Reverend Irving A. Burnap from its pastorate. The members appeared unwilling to cooperate with any other congregational church in town if required to deed their property to that church, or be dictated to in any way by it, or be indebted to it for the financial support which it would have to give if it assumed the burdens of a smaller congregation, and the majority of them were extremely reluctant to accept the resignation of Reverend Mr. Burnap, arguing that no minister could be found who would be willing to take up the heavy burdens of finance which the pastorate would involve, and that Mr. Burnap should remain with the church until the outlook was better." Unquote. Further along, the article says, quote, "All that has been said this evening is of money," said Mr. Newton, a younger member of the church. "And if this church is nothing but a business institution, the best thing that we can do is to file a petition and go into bankruptcy. What this church really lacks is enthusiasm and Christianity. Take the program from the beginning. The morning service is at 11 o'clock, and at that time, those of us who get here find the choir holding a rehearsal. There are not enough Sunday school teachers, and we are constantly losing our boys and girls so that no future congregation is being built up. The evening service is a farce. The choir is absent, there is no one to pump the organ, and I have seen Sundays where there was not a member of the church on hand to act as an usher or to pass the plate to the few strangers who chanced to drop in at the service. Thursday night prayer meetings might as well not be held, for over half the time our pastor is the only one who appears for the service. Our trustees' meetings have to be adjourned for lack of a quorum. The Ladies' Aid Society does not meet, has not met since the president has been ill. No one knows who belongs to it or what it is expected to do. The other societies are as bad. How can we expect financial aid when we have no interest?" Unquote. So as you can imagine, the congregation soon dispersed, and the following year, the building was bought by a new congregation. It became St. Paul's English Lutheran Church, which would remain there until 1943. In that year, St. Paul's merged with Trinity Lutheran Church, located nearby in the Frog Hollow neighborhood at the corner of Russ and Babcock Streets. The merged church was called Grace Lutheran Church, and in 1951 that congregation moved to a new building erected at the corner of Woodland and Niles Street, which continues as Grace Lutheran Church today. The old church building at Park and Park Terrace was purchased by the French Social Circle for its clubhouse. At the time, there was a significant French-speaking community in the neighborhood. Just a few blocks away is St. Anne Roman Catholic Church, which began as a parish for French-Canadian immigrants. The French Social Club would expand the old St. Paul's Church building, but eventually they demolished it in the 1960s and replaced it with a new mid-century modern-style building. The club moved to East Hartford in the 1990s, and their former building was demolished just last year to make way for a new affordable housing development on the site called The Hub on Park Street. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button. You can also subscribe and leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.